Yevamos Daf contains three primary sugyas and one Mishnah. Until the first Mishnah, the Gemara is commenting on the last Mishnah. The Gemara is going to discuss whether when Vezin gives a psak based on one witness and it turns out to be wrong, is that considered to be a hira'ah that's wrong and it has the halachos of a place where Vezin give a wrong hira'ah, or is that just what the Gemara calls a ta'os? It's not a wrong hira'ah, it's just a mistake, and therefore it doesn't get the same halachos as a hira'ah that's not la halacha. The Gemara will explain the difference, and the Gemara will bring a machlokes as to how we understand the testimony of an Eid Echad. Then the Gemara goes on to the case where we allowed a woman to remarry, and she didn't remarry properly. What does it mean that she didn't remarry properly? What's that referring to? Machlokes amaram of that. Then we get to our Mishnah, which discusses what happens when a woman receives wrong information about the death of her husband or her son, as far as the halachas of Yibum are concerned, whether she gets married to Yevamos Daf wrongly, or she does Yibum wrongly based on that halacha, how that affects her afterwards. The Gemara will then get into at length the concept of Yevama, marrying to the shuk by mistake. Is there tfisas kedushin on such a marriage of Yevama shuk or not? Let's begin. The Gemara is discussing a situation where a woman heard based on one witness that her husband had died. The halacha is that Vezdin gives a psak based on one witness that a woman is allowed to remarry if she has testimony that her husband died. And the Mishnah had said that counts as a hurrah of the Beis Din. If the husband then comes back and turns out that it was wrong, it has the halachos of a Beis Din that gave a wrong hurrah, a wrong psak. Now the halacha there is that if a Beis Din gives a wrong psak on something which is an iser kares, there is no carbon chatos of the yachid. The single individual doesn't have to make carbon chatos. It has a different halacha. It has a din of a Beis Din that gives a wrong psak on an iser kares. If the entire tzibur followed it, they have to bring a carbon par helam davar shel tzibur, and the yachid doesn't have to bring anything. So our Mishnah said that this counts as that situation, and therefore the woman doesn't have to bring a carbon chatas yachid. So the Gemara says that in the Beis Medrash they learned it differently. They said this is not considered to be a hirah that's wrong. This is considered to be a mistake. Beis Din didn't give a wrong hirah. Beis Din followed a wrong mitzias. They thought he died. It turns out that he didn't die. And they were not giving a hurrah. They didn't give an original conclusion that they came to on their own. That's what a hurrah is, where they made a shikul hadas. They made a decision, and they gave the wrong hurrah. Here, they followed the rules, and it came out wrong. That's just called a ta'os. That's not called a hurrah. So the Gemara says, where do you see such an example of a ta'os that's not a hurrah? So the Gemara says, you have a case like that. If it was a cloudy day, and the Beis Din told everybody Shabbos is over, and people were mechalel, and then the clouds parted, and it turns out that the sun hadn't set yet. So the Beis Din saw what they saw, and they said the wrong mitzias. That's not a hirah. So there, the halacha is that that's not called a mistake. There's no par helam davar shel tzibur, and everybody has to bring their own carbon chatos. It's not called a wrong hirah. So the Gemara says that Zeiri said that in the Beis Medrash they said that this case where they followed an Eid Echad, they followed the rules. They followed one witness. It's not called a hirah, and therefore she does have to bring a carbon chatas yachad. It's not a hirah of Beis Din. Now the Gemara says that Rabbi Nachman says no, this is a hirah. And the reason it's hirah is because nobody told the Beis Din to come to this conclusion that you're supposed to follow Eid Echad. In Kol Terakul, you don't follow one witness. It's the Beis Din here that said that because a woman is going to be careful to make sure that she knows that it's really true, therefore you could follow the testimony of one witness. That's a hurrah that Beis Din made, and that hurrah turned out to be wrong in this situation. It says, Rav, I'll prove to you that this is not correct. I'll prove to you that this is called a ta'is, not a hurrah. How do you see that? Because if it would be a hurrah, then Beis Din can't go back and forth. For example, if you have a Beis Din that ruled on a piece of chalev or blood, and they paskin that it's mutter, and then they switched and they decided that it's usher, and they go back to say that it's mutter again, nobody's going to listen to them. It's not going to be the correct halacha. You can't go back and forth. You can't say mutter, usher, back to mutter. Here, though, you will say that. Why? Because if this one witness comes and gives a psak that she's allowed to remarry, Beis Din will paskin that she is allowed to remarry. If then two witnesses come that she's not allowed to remarry, two witnesses come and say the husband's alive, Beis Din will follow the two witnesses. 2 beat 1. Then if another one comes and says that he is dead, then it'll be 2 against 2. Beis Din will go back to the situation before and will say that she is allowed to remarry. So you see, we could go back and forth. Now, if it would be a hirah, you couldn't go back and forth. Obviously, it's not considered to be a hirah in a situation like this. It's considered to be a ta'is. Now, the Gemara says that Rabbi Eliezer also holds this is a tois, not a hirah. You see that because it's a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yikov hadin sahar. He says, let this psak here try to uproot the mountain. well, there's a mountain here. You're going to give me a psak, al pi halacha, there's no mountain. The mountain is here. The Metzias shows that it's wrong, and therefore it's a wrong statement that the Beis Din made. It's not a wrong hira, it's a wrong statement. It's a Metzias that's wrong, and therefore she has to bring a chatas shmein, and she has to bring a nice fat carbon chatas. So the Gemara says, why does she have to bring a carbon chatas? Obviously, because it's not a hira, it's a mistake. So the Gemara says, maybe Rabbi Eliezer doesn't hold that it's not a hira, it's a mistake. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer argues on the entire concept that a yachid doesn't bring a carbon chatas when it's not a hira. Maybe he holds that even when you have a hira, a yachid still has to bring a carbon chatas. The Gemara says, if that would be true, and that's what we think you have to bring carbon chatas, why would he say yikiv adin sahar? That kind of expression is meant to show that we're trying to uproot a mitzias, and this is not a psak here, this is a mitzias. Okay, so the Gemara leaves it at that. Now the Gemara goes to the next line in the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that if the Beis Din gave her psak al pi edacha that she's allowed to remarry, but instead of remarrying, she goes and she's kilkila. She messes up. Then she can't hide behind the Beis Din and say, I don't have to bring a carbon chatas. Beis Din said I could. Beis Din never said you could do a kilkila. Beis Din said you could do a proper marriage. So Gemara wants to know what's a kilkila. So Gemara quotes a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yochanan. Now, if she goes and she does an Isser marriage like Almanal Kohen Gadol Gusha or Chalutza to Kohen Hedyet, everybody agrees that's not what the Beis Din had in mind. Beis Din didn't say you could do that. Beis Din said you could do a kosher marriage, not an improper marriage, and she can't hide behind that. If, however, she goes and she's mezaneh, so here you have a machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer says that's called that you can't hide behind the Beis Din. Beis Din didn't go say that she could be mezaneh. Beis Din said she could go get remarried. Rabbi Yochanan says no. That's not what it's referring to. Zinsa, she could blame the Beis Din because the Beis Din are the one who made her a pnuya. The Beis Din are the one that says she's single, and that's what put her in a situation where she went and she was mezaneh afterwards. So therefore, she could have hid behind the Beis Din. The Beis Din gave her that ability to go be free. It says we have a brisa that seems to go like Rav Yochanan. It says if the Beis Din paskin that she could remarry, and she went and she was mekalkel kigoyin, for example, manal kohen gadol gusha v'chalutza kohen hedyet. So there's the example. That's the only situation in which it's called kilkula that she can't hide behind the Beis Din. So that's like Rav Yochanan, that zinsa she would be able to hide behind the Beis Din. So this brisa clearly shows like Rav Yochanan, but let's finish what the brisa means to say. It brings the machlokes tanaim. How many karbonos does she have to bring? Everybody here in the brisa agrees she has to bring a carbon. And she by kilkala by Amana Kain Gadol Gusha Kain Hedyet. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, she has to bring a new carbon chatas for every single beer she does to her husband, who's the Gusha V'chalutza Kain Hedyet, or Amana Kain Gadol. Chachamim say she brings one carbon for everything, for all the beers. But if she marries a bunch of different times be'isser, then she has to bring one for each guf. For each person is a new carbon chatas, but for the same husband, it's only one carbon chatas for all of them. So that's a machlokes tanaim. Either way, we see it supports Rabbi Yochanan. We now get to the Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses 4 cases where a woman thought that her husband had died and she got misinformation. The first 2, the question wasn't whether he was dead or not. He definitely was dead. The question was who died first, him or his son, and therefore is she falling to Yibum or not? If he died before his son, then at the time that he died there was a son, and therefore there's no Yibum. Even if the son died later, there's still no Yibum, and she's mutter to the shuk. If it was the other way around, if the son died first, and at the time the husband died, there was no son, and she falls to Yibum. So she got wrong information. Both ways she could have messed up, and both ways the halacha is going to be that she has to go out from her second husband, and the kid is a mamzer. This is going to be according to Rabbi Kiva. The Gemara will say who holds that a Yevamos Daf has no tefisas kedushin and it's chayav kares, and it makes it's not chayav kares, but it does make mamzerim. So the first case is where they told her that the husband died first and then the son died, and therefore she is mutter to go to the shuk. She went and she married somebody from the shuk, but then she found out that it was the opposite. She had fallen to Yibum, and she was a Yevamos Daf, so she has to go out and the Vlad's a mamzer, according to Rabbi Kiva. Now the Gemara, the Mishnah uses an interesting expression. It says Vlad Rishon v'Achron mamzer. The first son and the last son are both mamzerim. The Gemara will explain that phrase. The second case is where it was the opposite. They said the son died first and therefore she could do Yibum. She went ahead and she did Yibum. Turns out that the son actually died second and there was no Yibum, and the Yibum that she did was an Isra Shesach. Again, she has to go out from the second husband, who was the brother. The kid is a mamzer. Both the Rishon and Achron are mamzer. Now, the third case is where she heard her husband died. Here there's no Yibum. She went and she remarried, and then they came and they told her he hadn't been dead at the time she remarried, but he's dead now. So the first, any child that she had up till that point is a mamzer. Any child that she has from here forward is not a mamzer because now the husband is dead. And there the phrase Rishon v'Achron mamzer makes sense because it's not Rishon v'Achron. Here it's Rishon a mamzer, Achron ain't a mamzer. The first any Vlad Rishon that she had up till now is a mamzer. Anything going forward is called a Vlad Achron. That's not a mamzer. Now the last case really refers back to our previous Mishnah. We had seen there that if she heard that her husband died, she remarried, then she can't, and then here her first husband comes back, she can't be with either of them. Here, she didn't remarry, she was just got kiddushin from the second husband, and then the first husband came back, but she never actually did a biyah. There, she's allowed to go back to her first husband because she never did an iser biyah. There's no asr baila asr leboel because she didn't have a biyas iser, she just had a kiddushin, and that kiddushin, no tfisas kiddushin. Says the Gemara that she does not need a get from the second husband. If she gets a second from the husband, it counts as nothing. It doesn't pass up for to kahuna. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Masi had a drasha to show that it says that a woman who's usher to a kohen is a isha grusha me'isha, a woman who's divorced from her husband. That doesn't include this case where she's not divorced from her husband because this man was never her husband in the first place. Okay, the Gemara begins. The Gemara explains what's the phrase Vlad Rishon, Vlad Achron. In the first two cases, we said the first kid and the last kid. What does that mean? The Gemara says maybe you want to tell me it means the first kid and the last kid, just any kid you had up till that point, up to any kid that you had after that point. So the Gemara says, what's the point in saying the first kid and the last kid? Oh, just say all the kids. The Gemara says, yes, that's what it means, all the kids. The reason why it says Vlad Rishon, Vlad Achron is because in the next case where she heard her husband had not died at the time that she got remarried, but he's dead now, there's a difference. And that's why we use that expression. The contrast, where the Vlad Rishon is a mamzer and the Vlad Achron is not a mamzer, that's different than the first two cases where both are mamzerim. That's why we use that expression. All right, now the Gemara goes into the concept of Yevamos Daf. So the Gemara says this, we have a brisa that says this brisa goes according to Rabbi Akiva, who holds that there is a mamzer on an iser lav. There's no tfisas kedushin on a chayve lav. But the Chachamim argue, the Chachamim say there's no mamzer created by Yevamos Daf. Someone says, why use the expression Yevamos Daf? Say there's no tfisas kedushin, there's no mamzer created by a chayve lav. What do you say? This is the Chachamim hold that this is Rabbi Akiva holds that there is mamzer from a chayve lav, but the Rabbanan hold there's no mamzer from Yevamos Daf. Why that specific case? So the Gemara says, because this brisa is written by the Tana de Bei, Rabbi Akiva, who have a different opinion what Rabbi Akiva holds. There's a difference of opinion as to what Rabbi Akiva holds. Some say Rabbi Akiva holds that every chayve lav creates mamzerim, and some say only a chayve lav that's a chayve lav of a relationship, like a lav, like a anusas of according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, which is a relationship that carries a lav. That's what Rabbi Akiva says that it makes mamzerim. But Yevamos Daf, which is not caused by relationship, it's caused by being a Yevamos Daf, that's not going to create mamzerim. So since this is that opinion that holds that Rabbi Akiva holds that Yevamos Daf is generally not mamzerim, this is really all in Rabbi Akiva here, and this means to say that this brisa is going according to the opinion that Rabbi Akiva holds that every chayve lav makes mamzerim, but the other opinion in Rabbi Akiva that this price is not going according to would say that Yevamos Daf is not mamzerim, even though other chayve lavim are, because Yevamos Daf is not a lav of relationships. Now the Gemara talks about whether or not there is tfisas kedushin on a Yevamos Daf. So the Gemara quotes Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, who says there's no tfisas kedushin on Yevamos Daf, and he has a pasuk to support that. It says Lo siyah eshes hameis lechutza. The phrase sihia means marriage, and it's saying there's no marriage of the wife of the dead brother out. If you marry somebody l'shok, there's no marriage, there's no tfisas kedushin. This pasuk is telling me there's no tfisas kedushin. That's Rav. Shmuel says I'm a supik, and therefore she has to have a get misafik. I don't know how do you read this. It says lo siyah eshes hameis lechutza. That means that there isn't a marriage. It's not chal marriage, or it means don't get married, but there is a marriage if you do. But I'm telling you, a lav, don't get married. Therefore, she needs a get misafik because I don't know if there's tfisas kedushin or not. Okay, how do we pass again? The Gemara says that Rav Mari Baruch said the name of Rav Ashi, the name of Rav Meimar, the halacha is like Shmuel. Okay, halacha is like Shmuel, she needs to get misafik. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi says, now that the Meimar said the halacha is like Shmuel, so now the following situation happens. Let's say the Yavam is a kohen. So she goes and she marries someone l'shok. Now she requires a get from that guy in the shok misafik, to get misafik. Once she has to get misafik, she's usher to do yibum, because her Yavama is a kohen, and he can't marry someone who got a get, even a suffix get. So he is going to have to do chalitza. So the Gemara says, that can't be. He's going to do chalitza, then she's going to go back and marry the guy in the shuk. So that guy in the shuk got away with one. By marrying her be'isr, he was able to marry her now, beheter, because he forced the Yevama to do chalitza. Maybe the Yevama wanted to marry her. So the Gemara says, so that can't be what he said. It can't be that he was saying she's now mutter to go back to the person in the shuk, and that he gains by having married her be'isr. So that's to be that he's saying something else. He's saying the following halacha, that if the Yavam is a Yisrael, so then the Sheni, the person in the shuk, marries her, gives her a get, now she's mutter to go back to her Yevama. So we're saying a chiddush now. We're saying that a Yevama l'shuk is now permitted to go back to marry the Yevama, to marry the Yavam, even though she went Yevama l'shuk. There's no asur l'boel, asur l'bal kind of concept here. She can't maybe stay with the person in the shuk once she gets a get from him. She has to be divorced from him, but she can go back and do yibum now, and that there's no isser from the fact that she did Yevama l'shuk. So Gemara says Rav Gidol saying in the name of Rav Chi bar Yosef in the name of Rav. Yevama, and this is going to cycle back around to what we just said. So first says the following halacha: Yevama does not have tfisas kiddushin, but there is tfisas nisuin. There is tfisas nisuin. So more assumes this means that if she does kiddushin, that even though Rav holds that if she does kiddushin as a Yevama l'shuk, she does not need a get. Rav said that. Rav had a drasha, but if she does nisuin, she does need a get. So more says that doesn't make sense. If kiddushin doesn't chal, so how can nisuin be chal? Kiddushin always comes before nisuin. So the Gemara says three explanations as to what this means. First one is maybe, all right, change what he said. He didn't say that there's no Kedushin, but there is Nesuin. He said there's no Kedushin or Nesuin. Second explanation is he wasn't saying that there's a get. He wasn't saying that she requires a get if she does Nesuin as a Yevam L'shuk. He was saying that it creates an Isser V'znus. She becomes like a Mezaneh. And she's Usser to do Yibum now, which is not like we had just said before, that she's Mutter to do Yibum. We're saying that she's Usser to do Yibum. If she does Kiddushin, Yevama l'shuk, she's also to do Yibum. If she does Nesuin, Yevama l'shuk, she's also to do Yibum. Either way. The Gemara quotes from Menuna, who says, Shemaris Yavam Shezinza is aser to do Yibum. She's aser to her Yavam. The third pshat is, we'll go back to what we said before. She has no Kiddushin, but she has Nesuin. And there's a reason for that. Kiddushin, she doesn't require a get from Kiddushin, that's Xeris HaKasav. She does require a get if she does Nesuin. She goes down, she does Nesuin, even though she did Kiddushin first. The Kiddushin didn't work. It's not Mechayev her a get. If she goes and continues and does Nesuin, now we obligate her to get a get. And the reason is because it's going to be confused with the case of a woman whose husband went to Medina Siyam, she heard he died, and then he came back. So there the halacha is that if she had done Kiddushin to a second man, she's mutter to go back to her original husband. If she did Nesuin, she's usher to go back to her original husband. And we have Gzeira from there to here. Just like over there, Nesuin creates an Isser, Kiddushin does not. And she requires a get from Nesuin, and not from Kiddushin. Requires a get from the second husband. The reason she requires a get from the second husband is because people aren't going to understand why she's leaving the second husband. They're going to think she was married to the second husband. She's not going to understand. They're not going to understand that there was no real chal marriage to the second husband because the first husband was alive. They're going to think she divorced the first husband, then she married the second husband. She never got a get from him. Therefore, we require a get from the second husband if he did Nesuin. If he did Kiddushin, we don't. In this case, also Yevam L'shuk, we're going to require the same things. The people don't get confused. We're going to require a get from the Yevam L'shuk if they did Nesuin, and not going to require a get for the Yevam L'shuk if they did only Kiddushin. All right, let's go back to the question of, is there a Tfisas Kiddushin? So Gemara says, Rav Yanai says in the Chabura, they counted, they voted, and they said Kiddushin is not Taifis on Yevam L'shuk. So Gemara says that Rabbi Yechanan said to him, it's a Mishnah. It's a straight up Mishnah that says no Tfisas Kiddushin on a Yevam L'shuk. Where do we see that? So we have a Mishnah that talks about where somebody's trying to marry somebody in the future. He's trying to do something now to create a future marriage, which is at this point usher, but it's going to become mutter. It's a davar shalai, something which doesn't exist yet. As of now, he's usher to marry someone. There's no tfisas kedushin between this man and this woman, but he says to her, when the situation becomes strange and we're mutter, so I'm giving you kedushin now, it should be chal right away as soon as we become mutter to each other. What's the case there? So somebody says to a woman, he's a guy, he says, here's kedushin, it's going to be chal as soon as I'm a gayer. Or she's a guy, and she says, as soon as you're a Megayer. Or he's an Evan, as soon as I become freed. Or she's an Evan, as soon as she becomes freed. Or she's married, and he gives her Kedushin, that's Chal, as soon as her husband dies. Or he's married to her sister. He says as soon as your sister dies and it's no longer an Isser Achos Isha, this Kedushin is Chal. Or she's Yevam L'Shuk and she requires Chalitza. And he says as soon as your Yevam gives you Chalitza, this Kedushin is Chal. All these cases, he's trying to make Kedushin Chal in a situation which is not Mutter yet. He's trying to say when it becomes Mutter, it's going to be Chal. All these Kedushins are not Chal. So you see clearly, all on this list of Kedushins that are not Taifes, you have there Yevam L'Shuk. So you see that the Yevam L'Shuk has no Tfisas Kedushin. Otherwise, it should work. So Gemara says, this is the kasha that Rabbi Yochanan asked to Rabbi Yanai. So the Gemara says, he answered him and said, if not that I picked up the pottery for you, you wouldn't have found the pearl underneath. I'm telling you that the reason for all this is, the reason for this Mishnah is because there's no Tfisas Kedushin on Yevam L'Shuk. You would have thought a different shot. You would have thought it's because Ein on the Makan Davar Shalom Ba'al Olam. You wouldn't have realized that this is, that the reason here is because there's no Tfisas Kedushin. You would have thought because it's usher to do now, so you can't do it. You wouldn't have understood that it's because it's not Taifes. Alright, now the Gemara is going to get into who is this Mishnah over here. So the Gemara says that Rish Lakish said, if not that he said this pshat, that the pshat here is because of there's no Tfisas Kedushin, if not for this great man, this Gavar Rabbah, who explained this way, I would have said that this Mishnah is Rabbi Kiva. And Rabbi Kiva holds there's no Tfisas Kedushin on a Chayvei Lav. And this has nothing to do with the special halacha of Yevam L'Shuk not having Tfisas Kedushin. I would have just said Rabbi Kiva holds no Tfisas Kedushin on a Chayvei Lav. So this is Rabbi Kiva. And you can't learn anything from here about the rest of the world. We're only asking the rest of the world. It holds that there is Tfisas Kedushin on a Chayvei Lav. Is there a special pasuk that says there's no Tfisas Kedushin on Yevam L'Shuk? But Rabbi Kiva could be the author of this Mishnah, and that's why this Mishnah holds there's no Tfisas Kedushin on Yevam L'Shuk, because it's a Chayvei Lav. And Rabbi Kiva holds every Chayvei Lav is no Tfisas Kedushin. So Gemara says it can't be Rabbi Kiva, because Rabbi Kiva holds that a person could be kind of Davar Shalom Ba'al Olam. So why wouldn't this work? If this would be Rabbi Kiva, the fact that it's usher now shouldn't be a problem. He should be able to be kind of her, give her Kedushin now, which is going to happen in the future, and be Chal. We already see that Rabbi Kiva holds you could be kind of Davar Shalom Ba'al Olam. So Gemara says that if a woman, there's a case, that if a woman makes a neder, so if the neder affects her husband, he could do hafaras nedarim, he could block it. So if she makes a neder, she says, you're not going to get any benefit from my ma'aseh yadayim. You're not going to get anything from my earnings. Now Chazal gave a man rights to his wife's earnings in exchange for the fact that he has to financially support her. So the Mishnah says, if she says that, he doesn't have to be made for that, because there's no value to that. He has rights to her earnings. So the Gemara says that therefore the Chachamim say, you don't have to be made for that. She can't block his access to her earnings. The Rabbanan gave him the rights to that. Rabbi Kiva says no, he should be made for it, because maybe she's going to earn more than the amount he has a right to. He doesn't have a right to all her earnings. He has a right to a certain percentage. 5 yados, Gemara says. If she earns more than that, so then he has no automatic right. So if she wants to be able to enjoy that stuff, so he should be made for the neder. So that's a Davar Shalom Ba'al Olam, because she didn't earn that yet. So Rabbi Kiva here is saying that obviously you could be kind of Davar Shalom Ba'al Olam, and she could make a chalois that it's usher, that she's making a neder on him. She's being makdish her earnings which don't exist yet, and therefore you see clearly that Rabbi Kiva should hold that this should be chal. So this is not necessarily, the Gemara says, could be that here it's not the pshat that other makdish Davar Shalom Ba'al Olam according to Rabbi Kiva, could be the pshat that she's being makdish her hand, that the earnings of her hands should be kadosh now, and her hands are bala olam, and therefore the earnings of her hand will have kedushin, will have kedusha, and will be us to her husband. That's not a Davar Shalom Ba'al Olam. That's a way to circumvent any Davar Shalom Ba'al Olam issues. You are makdish what creates that monetary value, and you say that anything that comes from it is going to be kedushin afterwards.